She was a single mother who'd found the man of her dreams.
She really loved him.
Will you marry me?
He's supportive of the children.
She finally felt like she found her soulmate.
But there would be no happily ever after.
There's blood everywhere. There's blood on the carpet. There's blood on the wall. There's blood everywhere.
She was shot 3 times.
Losing such a good person so unexpectedly, just an awful experience.
It's a pain that I can't put into words.
The investigation will uncover a mysterious stalker.
She said she was dead.
Odd stuff was happening.
Somebody years old, but chasing her, like, following her.
It was terrifying.
He was obsessed with her.
He had photos of her.
But it's his identity that's the real shock.
Why didn't you tell us?
He didn't want to get her in trouble.
It just spiraled out of control.
And all of a sudden, her life was just taken from us.
September 16th, 2018. It's late Sunday night in Jacksonville, Florida, a city that's one of America's foremost military towns.
One of the largest naval air stations in the United States is located here in Jacksonville.
There are about 75,000 uniformed personnel and civilian military employees in the Jacksonville area.
Because military folks are always on the move to different duty stations and they get promoted and transferred, there's a lot of turnover.
But some service members do put down roots. Just after midnight, Duval County 911 receives a frantic call from the normally quiet suburban home of Chief Petty Officer Andrea Washington.
911, look, we need somebody here immediately.
The caller is Marvin Jefferson.
He says that he and Andrea's fiance, Danny Beard, had just walked in and found her lying on the floor.
There's blood everywhere. There's blood on the carpet. There's blood on the wall. There's blood everywhere.
And according to Marvin, there's nothing they can do for Andrea.
She seems to be on the floor dead.
A chief petty officer in the U.S. Navy, leadership came naturally to Andrea Washington.
She was the mother of 3 boys.
She always wanted a girl because me and my other best friend, Tamara, we both had girls. But she needed boys because she was tough.
Raising her sons as a single mom meant she was driven, too.
She would make sure that those boys would get the best of everything, whatever they wanted, whatever they needed.
She loved her boys. And just like any parent, they want the best for their kids, and that's just who she was.
Her boys was her world. It was always me and the boys, me and the boys. I gotta do this for the boys. So that was her life, her 3 boys.
And the desire to give her boys the best life possible led Andrea to enlist in the Navy.
I think what drew her to the Navy, we had a cousin that was in the Navy. She was an officer, and I think that inspired her to join and to change her life and to better provide for her children.
Everything she did was to set herself up to where she could have a good life with her boys.
But it wasn't always easy.
Oftentimes, when she was out to sea, she would talk about missing the boys, and it definitely affected her, not being able to be there all the time. She understood that that was something that she had to do, but still, as a mom, it tore her up on the inside to have to be absent from their lives.
Everyone, they can't do what we do. And it's not even that our jobs is difficult, it's just a sacrifice that we have to make on a daily basis. We do have to miss birthdays, games, or graduations.
She sacrificed so much.
That included her personal life.
Her focus always was the boys and her career, and then a relationship would always just kind of come after those things. So she didn't place a lot of emphasis on dating or being in a serious relationship.
But in 2016, with her son's teenagers, Andrea decided to give internet dating a try and matched with a man named Danny Beard.
It's always weird meeting face to face for the first time.
Right. Your profile picture definitely doesn't do you justice.
After that initial date, Andrea really liked him.
She was excited. She said, I met this guy. He's a truck driver. He has his own business. He's on the road a lot. He understands the whole military lifestyle and he's supportive of it.
She introduced him to myself and some other friends, and we all started to hang out together.
To Andrea's friends, it was obvious the couple was a great match.
He was just a great guy. He showed a lot of care and affection for Andrea. He was really good with the boys. She was able to rely on him keeping the boys while she was out at sea. He would make sure the boys was clean, they were fed, they got to school on time. He would make sure they did their homework. And that was the one thing she was searching for in a partner. Not only somebody that loved her, but somebody that also loved her boys.
1 year into the relationship, Danny proposed.
He gave her a ring, and I know she was very happy and excited.
She was ready to get married. Family was very important to her. So to have a whole family and be able to raise her boys with someone that can step in as that second parent, that was part of the excitement for her.
We were really very happy for her. I couldn't think of a person more deserving to have a happy ending than her.
And before they exchanged vows, Andrea hit another well-deserved milestone. In September of 2018, she was promoted to Chief Petty Officer.
Chief Petty Officer is one of the higher enlisted ranks of the Navy, very difficult to obtain, very competitive. So it was a crowning professional achievement in her naval career.
In a male-dominant profession, to rank up in that manner lets me know that she was not only passionate and ambitious, but she was respected and revered.
I was able to travel down to Jacksonville and witness her get promoted. It was a great experience. I was proud of her.
But now, just 48 hours after the promotion ceremony, Danny and his friend Marvin have found Andrea on the floor of her Jacksonville home.
There's blood everywhere. There's blood on the carpet, there's blood on the wall, there's blood everywhere.
They think she's been shot.
Can we try to start CPR?
No, look, she's beyond that. She's beyond that. Send someone immediately.
When first responders arrive at the scene, they find Marvin and Andrea's fiance, Danny Beard, waiting outside.
Danny appeared to be very broken up and distraught.
But in his grief, he gives the police on the scene their first possible clue.
I knew something was gonna happen. Someone's been stalking her.
Newly promoted to Chief Petty Officer, Andrea Washington had it all.
She was a wonderful mom. She's thriving in her career. She has the support of her boyfriend.
She seemed really happy. She was living her best life.
Until it all came to a sudden, shocking end.
Andrea! No!
Her fiance, Danny Beard, and his friend Marvin Jefferson found her dead in her home.
They found her laying on the floor in a pool of blood.
Send someone, please. We need help. Please.
And when they get there, paramedics confirm that she is dead.
When homicide detectives arrive on the scene, they speak briefly with Danny and Marvin outside the house.
So you think someone was stalking her?
Look, that's what she said.
That afternoon, Danny Beard was texting her.
And according to Danny, everything was fine.
The kids were staying with family, so Andrea had been hanging out with her friends.
But then, a little after 9 p.m., he'd received another text.
Andrea told him that someone was following her.
I tried calling her, but she wouldn't answer.
That's when he became very concerned that something might have happened to her.
It was also when he decided to go check on Andrea.
He went to his friend Marvin's house first to see if he would come over with him.
You know, just see what happens, just in case.
He felt like he couldn't go over there alone.
But now he wonders if he had made the right choice.
I should have got here sooner.
While uniformed officers transport Danny and Marvin to the station for formal statements, detectives conduct a walkthrough of the crime scene.
The crime scene itself was in good condition. Her home was well kept.
But in the kitchen, detectives found clear evidence of a struggle.
Where the kitchen enters into the master bedroom, there was a broken wine bottle, scattered glass throughout the floor.
Andrea's body is only a few feet away.
Andrea Washington was found in the threshold of her bedroom.
She's been shot multiple times, including at least once in the head.
At the scene, there were 3 live rounds, as well as 3 shell casings.
The empty casings and live rounds are all .25 caliber.
With smaller calibers, sometimes the ammunition may be a little bit less reliable, so the round may not fire, and you can cycle the weapon and it ejects the live round, so it may have been a misfire.
Then, looking around the room, detectives quickly realize something is missing.
Andrea's phone is not anywhere in the house, indicating that the killer must have taken it with them.
One of the first things that investigators look for is a victim's cell phone, because that contains a whole lot of clues.
They aren't without any clues, however.
There was a ball cap sitting on the couch, and that seemed to be out of place.
They thought the killer had likely left the baseball cap.
Despite that, there are also signs that Andrea's killer tried to cover their tracks.
She had an ADT home security system.
But somebody had removed a lot of the components of that system.
All of the security cameras and equipment was gone.
That told investigators that it was somebody that knew about the security system.
After completing their walkthrough of the crime scene, the detectives conduct a brief canvass of the surrounding homes.
But none of the neighbors reported hearing or seeing anything unusual that night.
We had no eyewitnesses. We had no neighbors reporting a fleeing suspect. They didn't hear any arguing that night. They didn't hear anything along those lines. So we really had a case where all we really had was what we had at that house.
Hoping Danny and his friend Marvin can help fill in the blanks, the detectives head to the station to take their statements.
Detectives sit down with Marvin first, since he made the initial 911 call.
They started by asking how he knew Andrea and Danny.
Well, I met Danny through Andrea, so it's only been over a year, but probably less than 2.
Gotcha. How did you know Andrea?
We worked together on the ship.
Like Andrea, Marvin was also in the Navy.
Next, the questions turn to Andrea and Danny's relationship.
Are they good? They're not good?
Marvin said that relationship between Danny and Andrea was rocky.
There was constant ups and downs, challenges.
I done played the middleman in their relationship the whole time.
And according to Marvin, Andrea and Danny had recently split up.
I suggested it. Because they arguing so much, I just need to give up on each other and leave it alone.
They stopped seeing each other shortly before she was discovered deceased.
Well, it was Danny's just without her house. She wanted him out.
But it was why Andrea really wanted Danny out that raised the red flags for detectives.
She had been telling me that he abused her.
Andrea Washington's friend, Marvin Jefferson, has revealed to the detectives investigating her murder that Andrea and her fiancé, Danny Beard, had recently broken up.
Andrea told him that she had asked Danny to move out.
This was just recently, like almost a little over a week ago.
Andrea had alleged that Danny had physically abused her.
He pushed her down and kicked in the stomach. and things of that nature.
But Marvin says he didn't entirely believe Andrea's story.
I called him out on that, and he didn't do that. And he said no.
He also said that there was something about Andrea's story that just didn't quite add up.
You got beat you all night while you spend the night with him and then wait till the next morning to go to the emergency room. Let's tell him she went to the emergency room.
Marvin also says he never witnessed any signs of abuse between the couple.
I've never seen any bruises, you know? So I don't know. I mean, I've never seen him, you know?
Marvin says he's not sure who to believe.
There was something going on, but neither one was giving a full story.
However, Marvin does know that Andrea had recently filed a restraining order against Danny.
There was a court date scheduled for the day after she was murdered.
According to Marvin, that's why Danny came by his place prior to checking on Andrea.
You know, he couldn't go by himself, but he got a restraining order on him, and they supposed to go to court.
When the questions turned to the night of the murder, Marvin says Danny had spent most of the day at his house.
They'd watched some football together earlier in the day.
Oh, we watched the Jets and the Dolphins.
Then Danny left to go have dinner with family that evening.
But he says Danny had returned a few hours later.
He said, I need you to go to Andrea's with me. He said, because I think something wrong.
What do you mean?
He showed Marvin the text that Andrea had sent him.
She said she was scared. He said, somebody followed her. Had been following her out there or something. And he told her to call the police.
Did she call the police?
I don't know, man.
He called her back, and she wasn't picking up. And he said it's not like her to not answer the phone whenever you call her.
Marvin says he'd agreed to go over to Andrea's with Danny.
He goes to the door. He rings the doorbell. Nothing happens, so he's knocking on the door. Boom, 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 boom. Andrea, calling Andrea.
Andrea!
Still no answer, so he reaches down and turns the door, and the door opens.
Front door?
Front door, it opens, yeah.
Andrea!
As soon as he turned on the lights, he saw her laying on the floor, covered in blood.
He saw it, and the shock, he turned around, oh, no, I failed. And she was laying on the floor.
After talking to Marvin, the detectives head next door to speak with Danny.
He started by admitting he and Andrea had recently broken up.
Danny told the investigators that their relationship was going really well until he lost his job.
He started going downhill.
And he admits that things only got rockier from there.
She had a restraining order put out on me.
He acknowledged he had the temporary injunction.
Was it just hands, or was there any kind of any other allegation that you threatened her or anything like that?
Yeah, she told him I threatened him. I threatened her. I did this. I did that.
But he denied doing any of it.
He also says that Andrea paid little mind to the restraining order.
You guys still continue to talk?
Yeah.
Danny had said even after the restraining order was issued, Andrea would often come over to his house.
I guess he didn't think the restraining order was for her, too.
Right.
When the questions turn to that day, Danny's story mirrors Marvin's.
Like Marvin had already told them, Danny said the two of them had watched football that afternoon. He had been chatting with Andrea on and off via text message, and then he spent some time with his mom and sisters that evening.
While he was there, he'd gotten another text from Andrea. This time about their pending court date.
She told me, well, I'm sorry about everything. I know you didn't push me. I know you didn't do this. I know you didn't do that. She said, I'm still in love with you. She said, I just wanted you out of the house. That's why she did all this stuff.
Danny was under the impression that Andrea was going to go to court with him and actually push to have the restraining order lifted.
But according to Danny, at around 9 that night, the tenor of Andrea's texts had suddenly changed.
She said, Danny, please help.
Andrea had told him that she was scared.
Like, what's wrong? She's like, yo, somebody is like chasing her, like following her. Somebody named T.
According to Andrea Washington's former fiancé, Danny Beard, she'd reached out to him shortly before her murder with some terrifying news.
Danny said he had received a text from Andrea that there was a guy named T who was following her.
Do you know who T is?
I don't know who he is. So she texted me, she's like, I need your help. I'm telling her I cannot come over there.
With the restraining order in place, he couldn't go to Andrea's house alone.
I can come to her house if someone is with me.
Which is why he had gone to Marvin's first before heading to Andrea's.
I showed him this. I said, I need to go to Huntsville to see what's wrong.
From Marvin's, they'd rushed over to Andrea's.
When you got there, did you go right in, or what was your...
The door was open.
Okay.
Which wasn't quite what Marvin told the detectives.
When you say it's open, was it unlocked or was it ajar?
Well, it's unlocked. Andrea don't never leave the door unlocked. Andrea!
But by the time they got there, it was too late.
I don't know what happened to her. I don't know if I don't know if somebody killed her or what.
Don't touch him, man. Don't touch it.
Marvin was cautioned, hey, be careful, don't move anything.
Before she told me not to touch that, I already got over holding her.
Danny said when he saw her, he immediately went over and wrapped her up in his arms.
At the end of the interview, Danny lets the detectives look over his phone.
I appreciate that because that helps us.
Sure enough, there's a message where Andrea says she is scared that someone is following her.
I just want to know who did this.
Danny also suggests that the detectives talk to Andrea's friend, Delana Rhodes.
According to Danny, Andrea had spent the afternoon before the murder with Delana.
They said they went to Boston's restaurant.
He thought that Lena might know a little bit more about this guy named T, who supposedly was following Andrea.
After talking to Danny, the detectives contact Andrea's friend, Delana, who was also a veteran of the armed forces.
I was a cop in the Air Force, and I didn't know a lot of Navy military members until Andrea came into my life.
When Delana comes in for an interview, she confirms that she'd been hanging out with Andrea on the afternoon of the murder.
She and I had talked the day before about hanging out that day, and I kept my word. I had a very busy job at that time, and sometimes I wouldn't be able to follow through and come when I said I was. But that particular day, something just told me, D, make sure you go and spend the time with Andrea.
The women ran a couple of errands, did some shopping.
They had dinner, they had a beer or two.
We went to a restaurant, and she was a Texas Houston's fan, so we went to watch the football game. And while we were watching the football game, she and I shared girl talk, about different things.
What kind of things?
Well, mostly Danny.
She had court the next day. We kind of talked about that.
Then, at around 7 o'clock, she'd driven Andrea home.
Walked her up to the door, and we kind of hugged each other, saying, hey, I love you. Good luck at court tomorrow. That was the last time I heard from Andrea.
She didn't say anything about someone following her?
No, why would she?
Danny had said that she had texted him about it.
He's lying.
Elena said there was definitely no indication that anybody was following her.
If someone had been following Andrea, Delana says she wouldn't call Danny for help.
Andrea knew I was law enforcement my whole military career. She was scared. I was 10 minutes away from her. I literally lived 10 minutes away. She would have called me.
But she would have called Danny?
No way.
Whatever had happened, he was connected to it. I didn't know at that time if he had did it or if he had had someone else to do it, but I knew he was connected.
No. Andrea Washington's friend, Delana Rhodes, has told detectives she's certain Andrea's former fiancé, Danny Beard, was behind the shooting that killed the 37-year-old chief petty officer.
He had murdered her. No one else would have had a reason to do anything to hurt Andrea.
She also says that the only person harassing Andrea that day was Danny.
The friend told us when we were at the bar, Danny Beard was texting her, asking to get back with her.
Asking, you know, where she at, what she doing, those type of things.
Despite her stance that she wanted to be left alone, he wouldn't take no for an answer.
But did he threaten her at all?
Not that she said. She was just annoyed more than anything else.
And by the time she dropped Andrea off, she was over it.
Delana goes on to explain how Andrea and Danny's relationship had come unraveled.
She started to realize he was telling lies about some things, like his job, the type of money he was making on his jobs. And I think once she started to realize that he was not being honest with her, she started to have some feelings of, is this the right person?
Delana also said, at around about that same time, strange things started to happen.
One night, somebody had left a threatening note at the door saying that they were going to do something violent to them.
And soon after that, someone had broken into the house and ransacked it.
Andrea didn't understand why someone would be doing those things.
In fact, Delana says Andrea became so concerned that she hired a private investigator.
They dusted it for fingerprints, didn't find any other fingerprints outside of her kids and Danny.
According to Delana, that's when Andrea started to suspect Danny.
Things just started to add up that something isn't right.
Nonetheless, Delana says it wasn't a deal breaker for Andrea.
Andrea wanted to continue a relationship with him. She had never been married before, and she wanted to be married.
But one night, that had all changed.
Andrea called me and told me he had been violent toward her.
He had pushed her and kicked her in the stomach, threatened to kill her.
I was like, Andrea, any man that kicks you doesn't love you. And that's when she started to realize that, yeah, this isn't love.
She'd taken out the restraining order soon after the incident.
She decided, like, I can't go any further with this person because I can't not only have this around me, I can't have this around my boys.
Based on what Delana tells them, the detectives now suspect Danny fabricated the whole story about the stalker.
She created skepticism about the text message exchange.
If he took Andrea's phone, he could have sent those texts to himself.
The breakup and the restraining order certainly gave him a motive.
He was served with an injunction on September 12th of 2018. This murder occurred in the evening hours of September 16th of 2018, one night prior to when the final injunction hearing was to take place.
No. Domestic violence is about control and asserting dominance. And so with Andrea going forth and filing that restraining order, she was taking her power back.
With suspicion mounting that Danny could be the killer, the detectives get a warrant to search the home where he'd been staying since the breakup.
Upon getting to Danny's home, they see this phone there and they are like, maybe this is Andrea's phone.
But when they did delve into the contents of that cell phone, they found that it wasn't.
It appears to be Danny's. He must have had two phones.
Once we got into that phone, that led to tremendous evidence pointed directly at Danny Beard.
They found some really disturbing text messages.
Looking at the text, it was clear Miss Washington had developed this great fear of him.
And based on what else they find inside Danny's home, The detectives suspect she may have been right to fear him.
They find a box of 25 caliber bullets, the exact same caliber and type of bullet that was used in the homicide.
The caliber of the projectiles, the markings on the projectiles, matched identical to what lay next to her body.
However, the detectives also find evidence suggesting that Andrea did indeed have a stalker. And his name was Danny Beard.
On his phone, he had an app that gave him access to Andrea's security cameras.
He has more than 900 photos saved from the surveillance cameras.
That told us that Danny Beard was watching her, using it to sort of monitor her, obsessively taking these still photos.
But it's another photo the detectives find that could prove key to solving the case.
They notice a photo of Andrea and Danny together. And in the photo, he's wearing a hat that looks a lot like the cap that was found on Andrea's couch at the crime scene.
But if the hat was Danny's, when had he left it there?
A quick search back through the security camera images saved on Danny's phone provides a possible answer.
All day long, the still shots never showed the cap on the couch.
It only showed up after Andrea's murder.
Detectives investigating the murder of Andrea Washington now have reason to believe her former fiancé, Danny Beard, shot the 37-year-old mother of three inside her Jacksonville, Florida home.
We found in a search of his residence a box of ammo, identical to what lay next to her body.
Additionally, they found a second cell phone at Danny's house.
On the phone, they find evidence to suggest that Danny had left his hat at the crime scene on the night of the murder.
But Danny could have dropped it when he came in with Marvin when he found the body.
Or was it earlier? When he came in and shot Andrea several times.
Detectives don't know, but they suspect Andrea and Danny's friend, Marvin, might.
When detectives bring Marvin in for a second round of questioning, he confirms that Danny had been wearing the hat that day.
During the day when we was watching football, I want to say that he did.
You think that during the day around 2 o'clock he was wearing a black hat?
If memory serves me correctly.
But Marvin further said when he came back later that night to ask for my help, he wasn't wearing the cap.
He definitely did not have a black hat.
No.
That told us it had just fallen off during the murder of Andrea Washington.
However, before they make an arrest, the detectives want to be absolutely sure.
We wanted one more final nail in the coffin, and we did what we called geofence location data.
A geofence warrant allows law enforcement to access information about how various electronic devices connect with the internet within a specifically defined place and time.
Your phone, when you receive a message, sometimes it'll reach out and it'll say, do you want to connect to Wi-Fi in this area? And so we wanted to know, was his phone reaching out and grabbing Miss Washington's Wi-Fi in her home during text exchange?
When the detectives get the results of the warrant, it leaves little doubt who killed Andrea.
Danny Beard's phone was inside her home between the hours of 8:55 p.m. and the last time it reached out to touch her Wi-Fi was around the 10:40 p.m. hour.
Exactly how he gained entry wasn't clear. Either the door was unlocked or he had a key.
And she was completely unaware when Danny slipped up quietly behind her.
She had a large contusion on her left upper back near her shoulder. Remember that broken wine bottle? It's our contention he must have come up from behind her while she was in her bedroom. That told us that's probably where he hit her. She started to flee out of the bedroom, and he shot her. She dropped after the first gunshot.
Then, Danny crossed to where she lay bleeding in the doorway.
Daddy, no.
The gun probably jammed at some point while he was doing this, which would explain the unfired round recovered at the crime scene.
He shot her twice more in the head.
Once Andrea was dead, Danny had carried out the rest of his plan.
He must have killed her and stood there right next to her, using his phone and her phone to text back and forth to make it look like she was summoning him over.
He also concocted this whole story about how there was someone supposedly following her.
It was a very blatant and obvious attempt to cover his tracks.
Before fleeing the scene, Danny also removed Andrea's security cameras.
Then he disposed of the phone before going over to Marvin's house for help.
It was all about establishing an alibi.
The suspect in this case really went to extreme lengths to cover his tracks.
But it was all for nothing. On December 7th, the detectives placed Danny Beard under arrest for murder.
I feel a sense of relief because the truth is finally gonna come out.
That's one of the things that I struggle with. Like, why didn't she tell me? I think maybe there was a part of her that didn't want to burden anyone with this information.
Anything that's going on in her life, she's not the one to be like, hey, this is what's happening. She like to keep everything internal.
The question is, will Danny talk when the detectives sit down with him after his arrest?
I didn't do this.
You did do this, Danny.
No, I didn't.
He was bent on denial and denying that he had involvement in the homicide of Andrea.
But as his trial date approaches, it becomes clear that Danny and his attorneys can see that the odds are stacked against them.
They came to us and said, would the family be interested in a disposition in this case? He'll admit guilt, he'll plead guilty.
The prosecutor saw the advantages in making a deal.
Andrea's family also consents.
They simply wanted the defendant to be held accountable.
In June of 2023, almost 5 years after he killed Andrea, Danny pleads guilty to murder.
He apologized, but it didn't seem genuine.
That was something that he clearly just read and felt obligated to do because he took that plea deal.
He never showed remorse. He had a smirk on his face.
The judge sentences Danny to 30 years in prison.
He was in his early 40s, so after he serves his prison term, if he makes it out of prison, he's going to be an elderly man. And we felt that plea accomplished a lot of goals.
But no punishment can take away the pain of Andrea's loved ones, especially her children's.
It's been tough. They lost their mother at a young age. So I think it was a challenge for them and probably continue to be a challenge as they navigate through life.
I pray that the boys know that their mom loved them more than anything.
In the interim, Andrea's friends and family have done everything they can to preserve her memory, not just for her sons, but for others as well.
It's extremely important to continue to keep her name alive so that this don't happen to somebody else.
I think it's important that her story is shared, primarily because when it comes to domestic violence,
January 1st, 2009, Pomona, California. Just 2 hours into the new year, 21-year-old Jessica Davidson receives a phone call.
She's leaving a New Year's Eve party with her boyfriend when she gets an unexpected phone call from her mother.
Her mom's name is Adrienne Davidson. So Adrienne calls her daughter Jessica to come to the house. And she says, I will tell you when you get here, I need you to just come.
Jessica and her boyfriend rush to the Davidson home, where Adrienne lives with her husband, Ezra, and Jessica's younger brother.
When they got to the house, Adrienne was outside in the driveway waiting for them.
And she says, okay, I need you to take your brother to your grandparents' house.
She makes a second request.
Adrian announces that she needs the boyfriend to take her somewhere. Jessica asks where, and in response, Adrian says the police station.
Confused but seeing her mom's urgency, Jessica goes inside to wake her brother.
It's kind of spooky, kind of weird. She's not sure what's happening.
Adrienne Renee Pert was born in 1962 in West Orange, New Jersey. She grew up in an upper-middle-class household with her parents and 3 siblings.
Adrienne's dad was a well-to-do dentist. She had 2 younger sisters by the same mom, and then they also had an older half-sister. For whatever reason, it seemed to be that Adrienne had somewhat of a difficult place in her family.
Adrienne's dad would question her intelligence. He would call her stupid. He would say she was sexually promiscuous. He would take a switch and spank her with things he didn't do to the other daughters.
After high school, her father sent her to Spelman College, which is an HBCU located in Atlanta, Georgia.
One of the things he did was make it really clear to her that even though he was sending her to college, his goal for her really was not so much that she get an education, but that she find a husband.
True to form, her father set up a blind date for her once she got down to Atlanta with the son of one of his college buddies. A gentleman named Ezra Davidson, who was a college student at nearby Spelman College in Atlanta.
Ezra came from Detroit, where his father was a successful OBGYN.
Ezra grew up in a very affluent household. His parents divorced at a relatively early age. He lived primarily with his mom.
There was an instant connection.
These are people who have a lot in common. They have these family backgrounds that go along with each other. They've had similar ambitions. They're both smart.
But as they got to know each other, it was what they didn't have in common that drew them closer.
He's described as very charismatic, very charming, gregarious, outgoing, pretty social. Whereas in Adrienne is described as the inverse, very to herself and a homebody.
She experiences happiness for the first time. She was deeply in love with him.
The couple dated for 2 years. Then, the happiness Adrienne waited so long for disappeared in a matter of weeks.
In junior year, Adrienne gets overwhelmed academically and drops out. And then soon after, Ezra breaks up with her. It was the night of a party that they had planned to have at Adrienne's apartment. And even though Ezra has broken up with Adrienne, he decides to still go ahead with the party, and Adrienne is allowing it.
This is absolutely devastating to her. And, we can all relate to being upset over a breakup, but this is, in some respects, I think, life-altering for her at the time. Adrienne goes into her bedroom and takes an entire bottle of sleeping pills and slits her wrist in an attempt to kill herself over this breakup.
Her sister finds her and engages 911, takes her to the hospital. She's held there for observation.
Adrienne is released the next day.
This does speak to a level of emotional dependence that is concerning. And it's concerning because it suggests that Adrienne feels like she can't live without somebody else. And that's a dangerous place to be.
After the suicide attempt, Ezra comes back and cares for Adrienne.
I do think that he felt on some level responsible for that, and then responsible for her.
Within a month, they were back to being a happy couple. During Ezra's senior year of college in 1984, the couple ends up getting married.
That same year, Ezra graduated magna cum laude with a degree in accounting. He easily secured a job at a top-ranked firm. A few years later, Adrian gave birth to Jessica.
She was a housewife. She was very devoted to Ezra. She moved with him for his work. They lived for a time in Austria.
They moved back to the United States, end up in California. Their son is born. Things are kind of trucking along.
Ezra decided to switch gears, making what he hoped would be a lucrative move from accounting to technology.
I met Ezra through my ex-husband who had a software company, and Ezra was an employee working in business development. He just picked it up very quickly and understood the technology and was able to work with clients to get them what they needed. He was just such a charismatic guy and vivacious and just drew people in, but he was also extremely intelligent. At that point, everyone could see his talent and his ability to work with customers and bring in new business. So that's why he was invited to join the new company as a partner.
This venture was one of the first of its kind to figure out how to put digital media on the internet.
For almost a decade, the company flourished.
In the early 2000s, it was almost like the Wild West of technology. And we reached a point in the company where we had grown significantly. We had some really strong contracts, and we decided that it was time to exit.
In September 2007, Ezra and his partners sold the company for a sizable profit. The windfall marked a new chapter for Ezra.
My ex-husband and Ezra were spending their social time together. They were going out to LA quite a bit. They were entertaining people at a higher level than prior with bottle service and spending more money because they had this newfound money, I believe. And so it was a happy time for them.
By late 2008, Jessica was in college. Adrian devoted her time to raising her son and taking care of Ezra. The entire Davidson family was enjoying Ezra's success.
He was able to put a lot of money down as a down payment on what he thought was his dream house in Pomona.
With a new home and a flush bank account, everything seemed to be going good for the family.
But the early morning hours of New Year's Day 2009 bring uncertainty. At Adrian's request, Jessica wakes her younger brother and ushers the sleepy child into her car.
Jessica is not sure what's happening, but she complies.
Jessica gets in the car with her brother and starts heading to the grandparents' house, and the boyfriend starts driving Adrian to the police station.
Eventually, Adrian arrives at an LA County Sheriff's Department substation.
Adrian walks up to the desk sergeant and, without any emotion, tells him, "I'm here to turn myself in."
Just hours into 2009, 46-year-old Adrian Davidson walks into a police substation in Los Angeles County, requesting to turn herself in. Adrian explains why.
She tells the police that she shot her husband and that he's back at their house in bed. She was speaking in a very matter-of-fact way, very monotone. This was obviously something that, was very shocking.
Certainly not every day that someone walks in and tells the desk sergeant that they just killed someone. So, for one, he's going to be taken aback by the rarity of what just happened, but also the fact that she does it in a steady state is going to be a bit off-putting, to say the least. The desk sergeant isn't going to ask any questions about the crime. They're going to get it in the hands of a detective.
Investigators step out to speak with Adrian.
Adrian explains that the shooting took place about an hour earlier in the upstairs bedroom at her home. She explains that her husband may be alive or dead. She doesn't know because she didn't check, nor did she call 911.
Given the nature of her claim, investigators dispatch patrol officers to the Davidson home, hopeful they will find Adrian's husband, Ezra, alive. Both Adrian and Jessica's boyfriend are told to stay put.
The police, not knowing all of the details, they tell him that they're going to be impounding his car, as well as taking Adrian into custody because of the confession that she's made.
Jessica's boyfriend calls her and says, you got to come get me because they're impounding my car. And Jessica's like, what is going on?
He's not sure what's going on. He explains that the police took her mother back for questioning.
Jessica rushes to the station. Meanwhile, police officers arrive at the Davidson home.
The officers find Ezra Davidson lying motionless under the covers in the master bedroom. He is dead due to a single gunshot wound to the back of his head. Adrian was telling the truth. A 9mm shell casing is found behind the bed, and the 9mm handgun itself is found in a box in the closet. A tag on the side of the box indicates that the gun was sold to Adrian Davidson on December 15th, 2008. The evidence at the crime scene supports Adrian Davidson's story, but nothing explains why.
Back at the station, investigators put that question to Adrian.
She was speaking in a very matter-of-fact way, very monotone. You maybe wouldn't expect someone to have that calm of a demeanor considering what had taken place.
Police interceptors have teamed up with Nottinghamshire's finest.
Details as to what
Brand new
led to the
force.
shooting. Only that she is responsible.
She shot him, she put the gun up, she cleaned up, she got dressed, she made sure that her son did not go into the room, she closed the door, she called Jessica, and she was driven to the police station so she can confess. That is totally inconsistent with what a murderer does. After a murderer commits a crime, a murderer tries to stage the scene to make it seem like they did nothing wrong. And the last place they'd go is they go to the police department.
She could have concocted any story she wanted to about what had happened. They'd gotten some kind of a struggle, some kind of a fight, the gun accidentally went off. She doesn't do any of that.
Adrian's 21-year-old daughter Jessica arrives. By now, she is in a full-blown panic.
As an investigator, you're going to read the situation and make some tactical decisions as to how you want the interview with Jessica to play out. Do you want to lead with the fact that he's dead and see how she reacts? Do you want to hold that back and see how she plays to see if she admits that she's aware of it or not admit to it? So in this case, it sounds like they decided to just come straight at her and explain the situation. First thing they do is break the news to her that her father is dead.
And at that point, Jessica finds out that her mom has confessed to shooting her dad, which is the last thing that Jessica was expecting. Jessica is just reeling with this.
Despite her shock, investigators hope Jessica can shed light on what transpired between her mother and father.
She does talk to the police and she tells them about what she knows about their parents' relationship.
Jessica explains that she recently found out that her father is having an affair.
On January 1st, 2009, police in Pomona, California interviewed 21-year-old Jessica Davidson about the shooting death of her father, Ezra. Jessica explains that a few weeks earlier, her mother asked her for help with a computer.
It seems that Ezra has decided to write a book. So Adrian wants to look at the book, and she asked Jessica to help her go onto the laptop.
Jessica helped her mother find the document.
Adrian went and read a manuscript, and there was a character in the book, and the way that character was described sounded like this woman that he worked with.
The name in the book is very similar to his secretary's name, and so she digs a little bit deeper, and that's where she sees details of email exchanges that reveals to her that he has been having an affair with his secretary, who happens to also be a college student who's about 20 years old.
Jessica explained that one email in particular sent her mother into a tailspin.
She finds essentially a written contract between her husband and her husband's mistress, where her husband has agreed to pay her rent, to pay part of her tuition, and to pay her car note in exchange for sexual favors.
This person that he's involved with is 20 years old, basically a year younger than their daughter. And so for her, it's like, you know, the world is crashing down.
Adrian was very surprised, she was very shocked, she was very upset.
For detectives, the revelation offers potential insight into Adrian's actions.
As an investigator, and from a legal standpoint, you don't ever have to prove motive, but finding out what the motive is something that gets the investigators' ears to perk up, and they're gonna try and pull on that thread to see how far it goes.
Investigators continue to question Jessica. She admits that she too was upset. Her father had been far less generous when it came to her.
Jessica is like, I'm driving a junk car, and my dad isn't helping me financially. She feels disrespected. She feels unloved that her dad is choosing to put a 20-year-old girl above her as his daughter.
Jessica and Adrian discussed what to do next.
Jessica asked her, you know, what do you want to do about this? I think maybe you should just go get a divorce. And her mom said, you know, I'll just figure it out, I'll handle it.
A few days later, Adrian took her findings to Ezra.
According to Jessica, her mother confronted her father about the affair, and he admitted to it. He explained that he had no intention of ending the affair, and he even went so far as to give Adrian an ultimatum.
He basically tells her she is number two, she being Adrian, and the young lady is number one.
He told her to either accept that he was going to be having affairs or he would divorce her.
Adrian did not want to get a divorce because not only religiously that it was not something that she agreed with, but also her identity and her attachment to her husband was a huge deal. She didn't see herself being by herself and not with her husband.
In the following days, Jessica says her mother called her incessantly.
This is very atypical of their relationship. Her daughter Jessica describes her as somebody who was, in some respects, emotionally distant, not somebody who would talk about her problems, and yet all of a sudden her mom is talking to Jessica every day, calling her multiple times.
After several days of agonizing over the situation, Adrian decides that she doesn't want a divorce and that she's willing to allow Ezra to have his affairs.
Adrian feels like she doesn't have any options. It doesn't necessarily sit right with her, but she tries, right? She's trying to say, okay, you know what, it's fine. I still have my home. I still have my life. I still have my husband. I still have my children. This can be okay.
Jessica says that on New Year's Eve, the whole family gathered at the Davidson home for dinner.
Jessica's there with her boyfriend, and they have a delightful dinner. Everything is going very well. After dinner, Jessica and her boyfriend leave to go to a New Year's Eve party.
Jessica and her boyfriend left around 9 p.m. Several hours later, she received the call from Adrian asking her to return home. Now, Jessica is demanding to know what happened after she left.
Jessica says to the police, I am not leaving this police station until I talk to my mom. And so they allow her to go in and talk to her mom.
There's no downside from the investigator standpoint to letting this conversation take place, because they know that it's going to be recorded, and even if you tell someone it's going to be recorded, once they get into the emotional exchange between a mother and a daughter about killing the father, it's a pretty good bet that something's going to slip out.
Did you plan this?
Just hours after the shooting death of businessman Ezra Davidson, his 21-year-old daughter confronts his alleged killer, her mother, Adrian Davidson. Investigators listen in.
What happened? You know what happened. What? No, I don't, Mom. I don't want to know, but what I need to know is, like, what set you off?
Up to that point, Adrian had been very calm, very matter-of-fact, but when she spoke to her daughter in the interview room, she really broke down.
I'm sorry. Oh no, I'm not mad at you, Mom. I love you, Mom. It just broke my heart.
But it's where the conversation goes next that really catches the attention of investigators.
I mean, is this what you meant when you told me you were going to take care of things on the first?
For the investigators, their ears are going to perk up when they get this tidbit where Adrian tells Jessica she's going to take care of everything on the first. And here we are on the first, and the husband's dead. To the police, this sure sounds like what she's saying is she meant to kill her husband on New Year's Day. But Adrian doesn't answer the question directly.
Jessica, kept asking her mother, why did you decide to do this? You should have just left him.
I got scared. Scared of what? I was supposed to be there. I just love your mother so much. Mom, we would have figured a way. We would have taken care of things. I couldn't live with my heart being broken every day. It just broke my heart. I don't know.
Following the conversation, Jessica and her boyfriend are allowed to leave. However, Adrian is placed under arrest.
The investigators are left trying to figure out, do they arrest her for first-degree murder or manslaughter? And whether or not this is a premeditated crime or whether it's a crime of passion. And they've got some information that suggests she's in this emotional state, but other pieces of information that are explaining that she's making very clear and calculated decisions.
Hoping to find out, investigators keep digging. They track down the gun dealer who sold Adrian the gun on December 15th. One day after she had learned that her husband was having an affair.
The gun dealer explains that Adrian told him that she was buying a weapon for self-defense.
She tells him her husband goes on business trips and she needs to feel safe.
But Adrian didn't leave with the gun.
The law in California states that there's a 10-day waiting period after you purchase the gun between when you make the purchase and when you can actually pick it up. And it's to prevent people from committing rash acts like suicide or murder.
She still goes and picks the gun up on December 29th. She comes home and she puts the gun in her closet. Doesn't tell anybody that she has the gun.
Was Adrian really looking to protect herself? Or was she planning her husband's murder? Investigators look at the couple's finances. They learned that in the 2 years since he sold his company, Ezra enjoyed a new lifestyle thanks to the hefty profit.
He goes through a period where he just wants to party and go out and have a good time. And he's celebrating, he's taking other people out to dinner, he's spending money on his employees. And it seems like Adrian is taking more and more of a backseat in their relationship.
Ezra got caught up in the excitement of having all this money, and he and my ex were going out and celebrating and drawing a lot of attention. I think in his mind, he was just enjoying his life and having fun and spending money.
By the end of 2008, Ezra's spending caught up with him.
Investigators determined that the family has fallen behind in their mortgage payments and are in risk of losing their house.
A fact investigators believe could have fueled Adrian's anger over the affair.
Yet, with all these financial difficulties, Ezra is still finding a way to make the payments of his mistress's rent.
He is spending all this money on somebody while their family was suffering. He's going to continue to do this. She's angry.
The question was, did she kill him as a result of provocation, or did she plan to do it?
Almost a month after the murder, investigators believe they have the answer.
On January 29th, 2009, Adrian is charged with first-degree murder. Now, prosecutors must hope that a jury believes that Adrian is a vengeful, premeditated murder.
In February 2010, Adrian Davidson is on trial for fatally shooting her husband of 24 years, Ezra. She is charged with first-degree murder.
It shocked me when they refused to offer her a manslaughter. It was an unlawful killing, clearly, but it was a manslaughter.
The prosecution make their case.
They point out that Adrian went out and bought a handgun the day after she found out that her husband was cheating on her.
She had to decide, I'm going to buy a gun. She had never had a gun before. She had to research what type of gun she should get. She had to locate a gun dealer. She had to talk to the gun dealer. And she put the gun in her room where she could use it.
Adrian's attorneys present their side.
In Adrian's defense, they didn't contest that she actually committed the killing. But what they were saying is that it took place in the heat of passion, that it wasn't a premeditated murder.
Jessica takes the stand, testifying about an incident that happened when the family lived in Austria.
Jessica remembers her mother getting upset with her father after finding out that he'd been having an affair with a stripper.
And her response is to take all of his clothes, and she cuts holes in all of his business shirts, and she also cuts out his face from a lot of their family photographs.
Ezra retaliated.
The daughter said she remembers her father dragging her mother down a flight of stairs by her hair. The daughter testified to how her father was abusive verbally and how he would beat her mother. Once they moved back to the United States, the beatings, the humiliations continued. He was constantly having affairs, constantly beating her, constantly humiliating her.
The defense calls who they hope will be their star witness, Adrienne Davidson. Adrienne testifies about her marriage.
She just wanted someone to take care of her, to value her, to validate her. And the truth of it is that Ezra was not always unkind. There were a lot of times where Ezra was glowing and made her feel good. And so for Adrienne, there was a benefit to her being the wife of Ezra and continuing. And that benefit allowed her to compartmentalize or become apathetic to the things that weren't working well.
But in light of Ezra's latest affair, her whole world felt uncertain.
It wasn't just sex with a stripper anymore. He was supporting someone else.
She is concerned that she's losing everything. Everything. She's losing her emotional security, her financial security. I mean, everything that she uses to base her identity on.
She tells the jury that on the night Ezra died, she made an impassioned plea to her husband.
She asked Ezra, look, I just want to have you New Year's Eve and New Year's Day without the mistress being involved. That's all I'm asking for right now. I'm going to accept her, but it's the beginning of the year. I just want to start it off with you.
Ezra agreed.
Ezra brought dinner and champagne home with him and spent time with Jessica and her boyfriend, who were headed out later to a party with their friends.
Jessica and her boyfriend left at around 7. And then Adrienne and Ezra had from what all accounts was a nice evening together.
Eventually, their young son goes to bed, and it's just the two of them.
They drank champagne, they slept together, they also watched New Year's festivities on TV. When the time came for the countdown for the new year, Adrienne was excited to share that moment with Ezra.
They watched the ball drop in New York. She was very much in love with him that night and very much enjoying that night. And she asked her husband, could he stay there? Could they have not only New Year's Eve, but New Year's Day also? And he told her no. New Year's Day will be for his girlfriend.
Crestfallen, she went to bed and waited for Ezra to join her. But he never did.
She came back downstairs to see what was happening with Ezra.
She sees that he's on his phone texting his girlfriend. She's assuming that he's texting the girlfriend.
And I think that just became so symbolic for her. It is the start of a new year, and this is how it started.
Adrienne says she returned to the bedroom.
She is just stewing over this, and she just has all this emotion. He comes up, and she tries to talk to him again. I'm just asking you for a few things. On the holidays, don't talk to your mistress. I mean, just reserve the holidays for our family and make sure that you're financially responsible for our family and for our children. And he just says, no, it's your problem. Deal with it on your own. I'm not making any promises to you.
He turned over, went to sleep. She was devastated. She went in the closet, almost like on remote control, got the gun, was intending on shooting herself in the head.
But before she knew it, things would take a very different turn. Adrienne Davidson is on trial for the first-degree murder of her husband, Ezra. She testifies that on the night of his death, she retrieved the gun from the closet with the intention of taking her own life.
She starts thinking about the logistics of it, the details of it, like where is she going to shoot herself? She decides to kill herself in bed.
She wants him to find her laying next to him, dead.
She held the gun to her head. She put the barrel of the gun in her mouth, all while he's there sleeping soundly.
She's upset and he's sleeping like there's no care in the world, like a baby. And it's too much for her.
Before she knew what she was doing, she turned the gun on her husband and pulled the trigger.
Just instantly, she changed the gun and shot him in the head.
The defense closes, arguing that the only thing Adrian planned was her own death.
She goes there to purchase a handgun with the intention to take her own life. And why do I say I'm very strong and clear on that? Because all of her life, at various parts, she's been suicidal. She actually attempted suicide when Ezra broke it off. What you don't have with her is a history of violence at all.
Will the jury agree?
The case goes to the jury on March 9th, 2010. It only takes the jury 3.5 hours to deliberate. They come back with a guilty verdict. They find 47-year-old Adrian Davidson guilty of first-degree murder.
By law in California, first-degree murder carries a sentence of 25 years to life. The sentencing enhancement of using a gun in the commission of the murder also carries an additional 25 years. So the judge didn't have any ability to give a sentence, less or greater than 50 years to life.
Adrian's incarceration leaves their son to be raised by family members.
She should have divorced him, but she chose something that was horrible and unimaginable, and it just ruined so many lives.
Cases like this showcase that we can never tell what is the perfect storm of events and factors that can cause someone to lash out or act out of character.